There's nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed. Welcome to The Bleeders, a podcast and support group about book writing and publishing. I'm writer and podcaster Courtney Kosak, and each week I'll bring you new conversations with authors, agents, and publishers about how to write and sell books. Today's guest is Nicole Maggi, who's had a pretty incredible publishing career, and her latest, A Murder in Zion, is out tomorrow. I actually know Nicole from theater. We did Richard III together over a decade ago in Burbank, California. And it was so awesome to catch up with her about everything she's been doing in the writing space since then. So I'm going to drop the full hour-plus conversation in the next couple months, but to celebrate Nicole's pub date, I wanted to drop basically the portion of the conversation that is about the origin story of A Murder in Zion. You guys are going to love it. The book has got an incredible premise, and Nicole is just such a fun voice. So here we go.
Hi, my name is Nicole Maggi. I am the author of A Murder in Zion, which releases on March 4th. I am also the author of The Forgetting, which was an International Thriller Writers Thriller Award finalist in 2015, and the YA contemporary book What They Don't Know. So I have this group of writer friends that we go out every like 2 or 3 months. We used to go out in like a big group of 20 people before the pandemic. And then like after the pandemic, we were like, we miss each other. We want to go out again.
Uh-huh.
But this was like in 2021 when people were like just starting to like see each other again. And we were like, but let's not make it a big group. Let's just make it the five of us. So we were out and we would, we'd all meet and we'd kind of go around the table and say, like, how's your writing going? What are you doing? What are you up to? Whatever. And it got to me and I said, well, I'm working on this fantasy book. But I have this other idea. And so I had watched the first episode of this documentary series called Wild Crime on Hulu. And I love true crime.
Uh-huh.
And I also love national parks. I love national parks. It's just my thing. I love national parks because I had been to a bunch when I was a kid, but I hadn't been to a national park in years, years and years and years. And then in 2019, my daughter and we were invited to a wedding in Salt Lake City. So I was like, let's road trip there. And we road tripped and we stopped in Zion, Bryce, and Arches. And we drove into Zion and I started to cry. I
Oh.
just, I looked at those soaring cliffs and I just started to cry because I think it's so rare in our daily lives that we are awestruck, truly, deeply awestruck.
Uh-huh.
And I felt that for the first time, and I couldn't remember the last time I felt that. And I just was like, "Ah, I need this in my life more than I have been getting it. And that's why I love national parks, because it's just you go into a national park and you're awestruck and you're present. You're so present. You can't not be present. And you don't have self-service, so people aren't pinging you and you're just disconnected and you're with nature, and there is nothing more to me that's more healing than nature. It's so necessary for our souls. Like human beings are meant to be in nature.
And solving crimes in these national parks is like a different kind of beast,
Totally
right?
different, really complicated because like you can't preserve a crime scene. Like you can't like put up yellow tape and have a bear be like, "Oh, look, that's yellow police tape. I guess I'm not going to go like, cache that body." Like the bear doesn't fucking care. So like, so I watched this documentary series and it's all about solving crimes in national parks. So whenever a crime happens in a national park or on any federal land, it's automatically a federal crime because it's federal land. And so there is an elite branch of the National Park Service called the Investigative Services Branch. There's only about 35 of these agents. They're highly specialized and they go around the country solving these crimes in national parks and other federal lands. And that documentary was the first time I had heard about the Investigative Services Branch. And I remember very clearly, my husband and we have a jacuzzi, and, we'll go into the jacuzzi at night and sort of just like catch up on our day. And it's a really nice sort of like
Uh-huh.
time that we have to just connect with each other and be like, what's going on with you? Like,
Yeah.
how's your day? Like, problems that we need to talk about, whatever. So I climb in the tub and I'm like, there is a branch of the National Park Service that solves crimes in national parks, and that is the coolest job ever. And my husband just looked at me and he was like, you should write a book about that. And I was like, oh my God, I should write a book about that. And so I kind of had this idea at the back of my head. So at that dinner, one of my friends is a writer, but she's also an agent. And I was talking about my fantasy, and then I said, oh, but I have this idea. And I said, you know, what about a book about this ISB agent solving a crime in a national park? And like it's meant to be a series where each book takes place in a different national park. And she started panting like a puppy. She was just like, and she was like, "Look, as an agent, I'm gonna tell you, right now, I couldn't sell your fantasy." Like, at that time, fantasy was a really hard sell. And in fact, like, the fantasy book that I had written for the book packager was still out on submission, and, like, one of the top agents in the industry was trying she was the agent for it, and, like, she couldn't sell it.
Yeah,
So, like
yeah.
so this friend of mine was like, "I can't sell that, but I could sell that mystery book." She said, "I think you should put the fantasy aside and write that book." And I was like,
Ooh!
"Okay." So I started writing that book in like November of 2021. I went on a retreat with a dear friend of mine who's also a writer, Dimitra Brodsky, and she and I like holed up in this house in the desert and like plotted out the whole book together. And I started writing it. I wrote it, and 2022 and 2023 were really hard years. Like I
Yeah.
had breast cancer. I lost two dear friends suddenly, like very suddenly, within 6 months of each other, and, like, there was just a lot of shit that was going on in those years, but I wrote the book, and I gave it to my friend who had encouraged me to write it, and we had talked about it. We were like she said, "I'm fine if you send it to other people, like, I would love to see it if you want," and I had a lot of friends who were querying other agents at the time, and, like, it was really tough. Everybody was having a really hard time with querying. It's really
Querying
hard.
just it blows, even best case scenario.
Yeah, and I mean, at that time, especially, like, everybody had written a pandemic book, and so people were just, like, querying agents with their pandemic books, and then there was also a huge amount of burnout on the editorial side,
Yeah.
so editors were being really slow, and publishers had let a lot of editors like, they had a huge amount of layoffs in the summer of 2020. They
Mhm.
never replenished those workers, and, like, editors were just burned out. So I was like, if I don't have to query, I'm going to be really happy. So I sent it to her and I was like, I'll give her like a 30-day exclusive. And if she doesn't want it, then I'll query agents. Well, she definitely wanted it. And so she and I, before we decided to do the thing, she and I like got on the phone and we were like, okay, like, here's how this is going to work because we're friends, but we're going to have this like client agent relationship. And we talked about, the boundaries of that.
That's so smart.
Yeah, and it's worked out really well. First of all, she's a kick-ass agent, and she's also like, I'll email her a question or whatever, and she'll say like, "Okay, so and the agent says this, but and the friend says this." So like,
That's amazing.
it's really great. It's worked out really well, and she's just been a really great agent for this book. So we put it out on submission in April 2023, and it was like so shitty, just, like, rejection after rejection rolling in, and it was
Oh,
really, really hard because I thought that this book would sell really quickly because it is very commercial, it's very commercial,
yeah.
and so it was really disheartening, and it was just a bad time, and, I like to think that I am more than just my writing, that doesn't, like, infect every part of my life, but it really did. It really did, just because I wanted it so bad, I wanted that. I wanted this book out there so bad.
Yeah.
And then at the end of 2023, which was, like, truly just a shitty year, we were like, what can we do at the end of this shitty year to like make it not be so shitty? And so we were like, let's go to Paris. So we went to Paris.
A plus
For
decision.
A plus decision. We went to Paris for New Year's, and I woke up in Paris on the day we left, January 4th, and I had a text from my agent saying, "We have a nibble from Ocean View." And now I had actually been the one to tell her about Ocean View. They're a small press, and I had learned about them because I had been at a Sisters in Crime Los Angeles chapter meeting where there was an author speaking who was an Ocean View author. And I was like, huh, let's add this press into the mix of
Uh-huh.
on the sub list. And so she had submitted to them in, late fall. And she was like, okay, like, well, we have a nibble. And I said, all right, well, I'm getting on a plane. So just email or text me or whatever, and I'll get the message when I get the message. So we had a connection through Atlanta. And when we landed at Atlanta and I turned on my phone, we had an offer from Ocean
Yes.
View. So, several hours later or whatever. So that was like, not just like being in Paris, but also getting that news like the
Yeah.
first week of the year was the best way to start 2024. And in fact, 2024 was kind of a magical year as far as like
Oh.
that and until the election. But
Oh God. Don't even get me started yet.
oh God, I know.
Thank you so much to Nicole. Make sure you order your copy of A Murder in Zion, or better yet, pick it up from your local bookstore. And thank you for joining me for this episode of The Bleeders. Oh, writing is so much better with friends. I'm your host, Courtney Kosak, and hey, let's connect on social media. I am at Courtney Kosak, that is Kosak, on Instagram and Blue Sky. And make sure you're signed up for the Bleeders Companion Substack for all kinds of newsletter exclusives. I send out a bunch of great stuff to my free list. And I actually recently launched a paid subscription where I take you behind the scenes of all my best bylines. I published a post about my return to stand-up comedy and how I got ready to crush my showcase. I wrote about my MFA and whether or not I think it is worth it. And I also did a really incredible manifestation workshop for the new year, but it's really good any time of the year. So all of that stuff is behind the paywall. There is a bunch of great stuff in front of the paywall, and there is a link to subscribe to the Bleeders Companion Substack in the episode description. Join me again next week for another all-new episode. In the meantime, happy bleeding!